Welcome to Evolving on Purpose with Matt Swartz. This podcast is where real leaders share the inner work behind their breakthroughs and where you'll find the tools and stories to work through whatever is holding you back from who you're meant to be so you can make the impact you're here to make and help change the world.
Welcome to episode 10. I am going to be talking today about expectations. Matt, why expectations? So we're just getting off the back of the coaching episode with Ren, and we thought it was going to go one direction, but it went another direction, and the direction it went in was expectation. So I'm going to get in there on this. So let's talk. You're not stuck because of your circumstances. You're stuck because your expectations, and then you're treating those expectations as a fact, right? So what does that mean? We just got off this coaching conversation with a capable leader, healer out there making the world better, running a podcast just like me, right? But she couldn't get traction on the podcast that she genuinely loves, right? So we're thinking, oh, this must be a skill problem, or maybe it's a discipline problem, right? If I just force myself or I try to structure this better, then things will turn out. But the reality is that the structure that we build, the structure that they built, was for a version of themselves that doesn't exist anymore. So it's like trying to operate, it's like trying to rebuild something with an old tool, right? I've got this and, I don't know, the chainsaw's broken and I'm trying to cut down a tree, right? Well, it's not going to work. And so for us, right, these expectations we form, what initially helps us, what once helped chop down that tree is now holding us back, and it's just getting stuck, right? This is not advice on how to lower your bar. This is not advice on how to settle for less. This is for the high performers, for the leaders whose own rules have quietly become their own cage. So let's talk about expectations, okay? Expectations feel like reality. Most of the expectations that you have today, you would tell me this is true with a capital T. And I get that, but my job is to show you that it's actually a belief. It's an interpretation about how things work or how things are supposed to be based on your past. So I'm going to come back. Last individual episode, we talked through the mindfulness framework. We talked about those 3 stages of perception, interpretation, and response. If you have not watched episode 7, I'm going to encourage you to go back, watch episode 7, because it's going to clue you into what we're talking about here. But the basic idea is I get information, perception, I interpret and qualify that information, interpretation, and then I respond and react. Okay. The expectation is the interpretation. The event is neutral. Dog walking up to me, right? The expectation is the lens. I expect this dog to be friendly. I expect this dog to be harmful if I was bit by a dog in the past, right? So the situation is neutral, but we keep judging it and we keep taking the interpretation as fact. So step 1 is to go, I am willing to be open to the fact that the interpretations I'm making are from past experience and they are not relevant to the current situation. That's where it starts. Okay. A standard is chosen and I'm trying to use different language here, right? It's okay to have values. It's okay to have a standard. It's okay to have a way in which you want to approach the situation. But I want that standard to be based on current information, not past information. Expectations are inherited from your past experience, from others, from parents, from society, and we often never examine them, right? So you may have heard a lot of coaches talking about beliefs, right? And this is kind of the belief conversation, but expectation is a little different, okay? Expectation is what you think is supposed to happen or going to happen based on that information. When I started this work, I thought I was going to be spending all of my time working on fear. And for high performers and leaders, the reality is I spend most of my time working on expectations. They should, this should, I should, right? Anytime you hear the word should, stop shoulding all over yourself, right? Those are your expectations. So I'm not asking you to drop your standards. I'm not asking you to compromise your values. I'm trying to help you get to the goal that you're actually setting in a different way because you've changed your expectations. Okay. Why are these expectations invisible? You don't experience them as a belief. You experience them as this is just how it works. And that's the trap. What is true for you is not true for him, is not true for her, but we assign truth like it's universal. And it's not. I am a subjectivist. And I see that all the time for my clients. I have so many clients. It's so easy to see when you're in my seat. All 40 clients come in the door, all with these different beliefs. And you're like, these are just beliefs. These are just expectations. But then when it comes to ourselves, right, we're like, no, this is true, right? So how do expectations show up, right? How do we recognize expectations for leaders, for high performers, right? I already said the first one, I said it's the shoulds, right? It's the things that are running you. Productivity should look like this. A good leader does that. I should be past this by now. Anytime you hear the should, that's your number one sign, okay? How do we know more deeply? There's heaviness. You can feel it in your body, emotionally. There's resentment. There's anger. There's fear when you push up against your own structure. When you have a task you're supposed to do, and then the way you set it up starts to feel heavy, yucky, like a cage instead of like an engine. That's where you gotta look. So look, and I shared this in the coaching episode with Ren, but I've been trying to launch this podcast for 2 years, honestly. And there were all of these expectations in my head about how it was supposed to look. I need to start over with these people. I need to do it this way. And it just kept not getting done. The problem wasn't the podcast, and the problem wasn't my discipline, because since I've retooled the way I'm approaching this, oh my God, it's been like, I can't stop it. It's a runaway train. I'm not trying, right? Right now, I put in a little bit of work before episodes, but other than that, man, it's sailing, right? Why? Because I changed the expectations. So if you notice that heaviness or resentment, part of it is that's our key to change that structure. And part of it's, let's go inside and let's figure out, where did those expectations come from? Why? There's usually deeper stuff in there. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's talk again about Ren. I'm not trying to pick on Ren. I'm just trying to use this example. So, Ren was talking about once upon a time, they used to bully themselves. They used to use a negative engine, right? Fear, self-bullying, guilt. But when you start healing and you stop bullying yourself, you stop guilting yourself, the fuel is gone, but the structure is still there. I need to accomplish it this way. And I did that by fueling myself with guilt. Well, now the structure is not going to work because the fuel has changed, right? So you're staring at a machine that you built to run on fear, to run on guilt, to run on pain, and it's not running. It won't work on peace. It won't work on love. It won't work on purpose, right? So, maybe the gas pedal isn't as gassy, right? The thing isn't working the way it's supposed to work. So it's not that it's not possible. It's just that you're still trying to, you're trying to drive a beautiful car with a big concrete block hooked up to the back, and it's not moving forward. So if we want to move forward with the new energy, we have to build a new machine, right? So, I really want to sell this home, and I want you to see the cost inside leadership, right? As a leader, as a high performer, what is the cost so that I can convince you it's worth doing the hard work to change these expectations? Because it is hard work. I won't pull punches, but it can have transformational effects long-term, right? So how do you know? Okay. Number one, you can see yourself burning energy, fighting yourself to fit the structure instead of building from what's actually real right now. So what's the cost to that? Wasted time, wasted energy, wasted productivity. And there would be a short-term cost of retooling the approach, retooling the expectations, but the long-term benefit is you're actually going to get where you need to go, right? Most of the time, this is an inherited standard, right? That came from somebody else. Perhaps it was the way that you were brought up. Perhaps it was the way that you moved through your career. And now you're putting it on other people, but you didn't actually decide on it. And if you really sat back and said, why am I doing this? You might say something like, well, it's just the way we do it, rather than, do I actually believe this? Is this actually meaningful to me? This is the kind of thing where people are like, well, in my day, we blah, 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 and those kids should have. Why? Why? Why should the kids struggle and suffer that way? Don't worry. There'll be plenty of pain. They'll learn. They'll grow. It's inevitable. Life is challenging. It doesn't need to be as painful. It doesn't need to be as suffering, right? So a lot of people in this case, number 2, have trouble adapting the strategy. Strategies need to be adaptable. They're contextual. They're situational. At different times, at different moments, things need to be different. What worked in the marketplace 20 years ago doesn't work now. What works today isn't going to work in 10 or 15 years. What works at this company doesn't work at that company. What works in this industry doesn't work in that industry. What works in this family doesn't work in that family, right? So this is, again, you've heard me say it before, what got you from A to B, from your old company to your new company, is not going to get you from B to C, your current company, to creating the things that you really want to create. Third, you think you're being disciplined, but you're being loyal to a past version of yourself at the expense of who you are now. I always say, a lot of my goals I formed when I was like 16 to 18, right? I wanted to be this famous therapist. I wanted to, like Alan Seaver on growing pains. It's like, God almighty, I do not want a 17-year-old running my life. So I'm loyal to this past version of me, but that past version of me didn't have kids, didn't have awareness and wisdom, hadn't gone through college, hadn't learned these things, but I'm taking advice from a 17-year-old. Now, I'm not saying crush your hopes and dreams. That's not what I'm saying at all. If there's a nougaty caramel center to that, the nougaty caramel center is I want to help people. Cool, 16-year-old Matt. You bet your butt you do. The world's broken and challenging and I want to help. Great. But who says it needs to be X way or Y way or Z way? 17-year-old Matt came up with that. So it's not that I don't love 17-year-old Matt. I just realize he has strengths and limitations. Strengths for dreaming, limitations for understanding the full context of the expectations and goals he's setting. The partner he thought he wanted to be with. The life he thought he wanted to live. He didn't have the full data set, right? So that's where we come to acceptance, and we'll talk to acceptance more. But again, don't get scared. I am not saying acceptance. Well, just lie down and take it up the butt and, allow things. Sorry, that might have been a little inappropriate. Sorry, but don't just lie down and take things as they are, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. I want you to achieve your goals. I want you to be a high performer. I'm the same way, right? But what I want you to see is that building from now is the only way to build. You can't build from a month ago. You can't build from a year ago. You have to build from today. We got to take in that new data, assess that new data, form a new expectation based on that new data, or form no expectation at all. Again, which doesn't mean we're not getting to our goal. I'll get to that later. Okay. So let's get underneath. Let's start to get to some of this deeper stuff, right? Before I do, sorry, I missed one thing, right? The real cost is also damaged relationships. I can't skip that. When we make our ideas and our expectations more important than our spouse, our children, our coworkers, the people we're leading, right? We will damage relationships sooner or later, because the idea in your head is not the reality of the actual interaction that you're having, right? And people do this all the time. I'm right, you're wrong. Okay, well, consequences, you're going to damage your relationship over time. I've seen that with my kids. I've seen that with my wife. I've seen that, maybe not with my clients, but at work with coworkers and colleagues over the years, right? And I had to do a lot of work to go, oh man, like, they say for this is like a classic couples phrase, right? Would you rather be connected or right? And I'll be right, but being right might come at the expense of the relationship. So I really want to clue you into that. So part of it is, the challenge is going to be productivity. Part of it is the challenge of the loss of the relationship with yourself. Part of it is, those relationships that you're really going to lose. And part of it is your emotion and your sanity and your peace, right? Your ability to stay regulated and engaged and calm and helpful to the people that you're leading, really comes down to your ability to shift your expectations and adapt over time. Okay, now it's time to go deep. Let's go to the deeper layer, okay? Where do expectations come from? We've alluded to this, right? But the real depth of this is that expectations fundamentally are rooted in survival patterns that hardened into rules. Okay, what does that mean? That means once upon a time, you needed to think, feel, or behave a certain way in order to survive. That might be in your family, that might be at school, that might be in the cold, dark world, whatever it is. And that specific way, in that specific time, in that specific context was so painful that it ended up hardening into a rule over time to help you avoid that pain in the future. You build the expectation that you can control that pain, right? So like, take some of my examples, right? If you're looking at the fixing pattern, right? The fixer says, I expect that I can control this situation and I can fix it. The pleaser says, I'm going to build an expectation around approval. If I do this right, then they'll love me, right? The freezer says, if I shut down, the problem will go away, right? Once upon a time, these things worked. I can keep going. The fighter says, once upon a time, I was able to make it my way, get them to do what I want, right? The flyer says, once upon a time, I got out of there and it worked. Right? The flexor says, once upon a time, I went back and forth until I figured out, and then that worked, right? So, each of these patterns are pulling from these past experiences where these patterns worked, right? And we can go into examples if it's helpful. So it's not about higher or lower expectations. It's about, does this pattern work in this experience? And if you're not getting the results you want, it's pretty clear. The pattern doesn't work. If you were getting the results, then that would be another conversation. But you're not talking to me or listening to the podcast because you're getting the results you want to get. You're listening because something's wrong, because you're not getting something you want. And we want to change it, right? So it's not the expectation really, because you can't see the expectation. It's what you believe will happen if you drop it, right? All the time, clients, I really want to work with you, but I don't want you to make me lose my edge. I don't want to fall apart. I don't want to be a failure, right? These classic things that I hear when people say they want my help, but, right? You believe that if you drop this expectation, you drop this belief, you drop this schema, this pattern, then you're not going to get where you wanted to go. Why? Because once upon a time, you did A and you got to B. So you want to get there again, but you're not trying to get to B, you're trying to get to C. So, I can share perhaps the best thing to do is a moment where an outdated expectation trapped me, right? And, maybe I can, give you some other examples, but let's start with me, right? So I definitely saw, that occurring for me in my practice, right? There was a time in which I think I've described this at a really thriving practice. Things were going good. I was doing anxiety all day, all night, anxiety, a lot of leaders and high performers. I had workshops for 8 weeks, and then I put them into groups, and I had 2 groups going, and I had a bunch of individuals. I was full. Things were great. But I saw that my clients were stuck at about 70%. And, in retrospect, the reason they were stuck is because I was stuck, right? I could only get them as far as I'd gotten, but I had expectations. This is how anxiety works. This is how I treat anxiety. I'm going to get them to think differently. I'm going to get them to do the habits. And I was missing the emotional component underneath, right? So that's just a work example for me of how those expectations were holding me back. I'll give you another example. When I moved back to Michigan, a lot of my friends had gone to hither, thither, and yon, and I was kind of starting from scratch, basically. There were a couple of people I knew, but maybe not people I was close with. And then when I met my wife, I girlfriend at the time, put a lot of time and energy to that relationship. But then, when we had our first kid, we didn't really have a great support friend network around us, certainly not ones with kids. So I had this expectation that she was going to be the one to do that for me, that she was going to build the friend circle. And she tried, and she had built something, but unfortunately the thing didn't really work for us. It really didn't fill everything we needed, and it had to change with time. And so at some point I had to challenge the expectation that I had in my head. Oh, my wife will figure out the friend thing. I'll focus on work. She'll figure out the friend thing. Well, that expectation wasn't getting me where I wanted to go. I didn't have the supportive relationships that I needed. So I had to take a step back, and I had to challenge those expectations. And it didn't come overnight, but over time, as I both challenged the expectations and then built the requisite skills with my time and my energy to build the relationships I was looking for, I can now tell you I have such an amazing network of friends. I was just out with some of the guys on Saturday. It's just such deeply fulfilling conversations. I'm so thankful for them. And they were there to support me when our baby was in the NICU. And it was just incredible. So, I had to change my expectations to get to my goal. The goal didn't change. My edge didn't get lost, right? I still have a thriving business, and now I have an amazingly supportive network of friends who get it. And I had to change my expectations to get there. right? I've seen this all the time, more down to earth, maybe like, I have clients who, had a specific process or system installed in their business, but then when their business grew from 500K to 2 million, now that process doesn't work anymore and it needs to change, right? Or maybe they had a specific key employee that they really loved, but as the company grew, that key employee no longer fit the role, or in some extreme cases, no longer fit the company at all because they weren't growing to keep pace. And so we have to fire, or create a boundary, or move them around, or do something different, right? So, perhaps the way in which you're interacting with customers needs to change. For me, I'm in the process of shifting my my sort of framework where for 15 years, I've been doing mostly one-on-ones. And these days I'm working on projects and I'm doing more groups. And, I'm shifting the way that I work because the way that I was working was keeping me stuck. Like I only have so many hours a week. I can only see so many people. My blessing is my clients, my schedule has always been full, but it's stopping me from creating bigger impact. So now I'm working on the podcast. I'm working on some groups. I'm working on, different, I'm working on maybe a book. Like there are these things that I'm working on with other people and other projects because I've opened up my expectations about how I'm supposed to work, right? So what does it cost to leave this unupdated, right? So if you don't update the expectations, right? Now you're measuring the new you against an old fear. And then eventually you're going to start to feel like it's you. You're going to start to feel like it's a personal failure. Something's wrong with you. Or you're going to start to blame it on everybody else, right? And in either of those cases, not only will you stay stuck, but it will also get more painful and more painful and more painful, right? So I always try to tell people the pain, the friction, the heaviness, that's data. That's information. That's letting you know where the invisible walls of the maze are, right? Instead of you beating yourself up and saying you're failing at your expectation, trying to, again, Ren's trying to get the podcast and they just keep like not hitting what they need to hit, doing the thing they're supposed to be doing, right? The expectation is wrong. What needs to change about the podcast? What was true about the podcast when it started may need to change. I would assume that as I go along here, I'm going to need to change what I'm doing with the podcast. Already it's pretty clear. I thought everybody would love the interview episodes the most. Turns out the most traffic I've gotten is actually on these individual episodes. So already, even a month into this, I'm like, oh, I may need to change my expectations about the way in which I design the podcast. Okay, right? Where there's too much pain, that is a sign to grow and change. It's not a sign to blame the environment, and it's not a sign that you need to feel powerless. Okay? So maybe you're bought in at this point. I get it. I'm willing to change my expectations. How do I do it? Okay. Start with waking up. We start with becoming aware. Become aware of the expectation. Say it out loud. Put it in a sentence. I believe I have to. I think I should, right? Make a sticky note. Put it on your, thing. We don't want to look for 20 of these. We want to look for the one or two. I would suggest one that you can see is really holding you back because it's causing you pain. If you can't figure out the expectation on your own, that's why I encourage you to use the 6Fs system, right? Is it one of these? Flight says I got to get away from this. Freeze says I got to shut down. Like maybe you can find an expectation through the lens of the 6Fs, right? Or perhaps through the foundations of flow model. What is it? Where is it that I am stuck, right? But if you're having trouble because it's really hard to see the label from inside the bottle, that's where a coach, a therapist, a mentor, somebody can come in and say, hey, take a look at this, right? I'm launching my campfire series, which is going to be a weekly group for leaders and high performers every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'd love any of you to come along. Just grab the link and register. The link is in the description. But this would be a place like if you can't figure it out yourself, and oh, by the way, it's free. I didn't say that. It's a free community, right? So if you're having trouble figuring out the block yourself, let somebody else help you. Let me help you. Let the community help you. Be happy to help you, right? You might want to then, once you notice this, if you notice the expectation, you might want to run it through a couple of questions. Is this true? Not, was it true? Is this always true? Can I poke some holes in it? Right? Is this mine? Did this come to me? Do I like this idea or do I feel forced to be in this idea? Is this my parents? Is this society? Is it my old boss? Right? And then number 3, is it current? Right? Does this work for the current situation, the current context that I'm in, or is this old data? Right? What needs to change needs to fit me where I'm at, right? Rather than what do I need to change to fit the expectation I built, right? Here I am, right here in the present moment. I accept the context, even if it's a challenging context, right? And then once I accept, I can go, okay, based on where I'm at, right? I have 3 kids, I have a wife, I have this business, I have these things. Then how do I get from here to that same goal? The goal isn't changing. I am still going to be a wildly famous Bill Nye type character for psychology, relentlessly heading in that direction, right? But what do I need to change about how I'm getting there? Right? Rebuild that scaffolding for who you are now. You don't need to figure it all out. Just the next honest piece, right? A scaffolding is meant to hold you up while you're under construction, right? When I was in New York, I used to, all these old buildings, for a year there'd be all the scaffolding on the outside of the building while they fixed it up. And you'd be like, oh my God, I got to walk under the scaffolding and blah, blah. But they're supporting the structure so that they can actually fix it so that then the scaffolding can come away, right? So we just need to build the next honest piece. Right? Maybe what was so important once upon a time is less important now because you've grown. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. You don't need to stay committed to what used to be true for the old you. Okay? Here's the paradox. The more you can challenge these expectations, the more effective you become. Not less, more. When you stop obeying the old expectations and start building from present reality. Call it wholeness that performs. The more whole you are, the more aligned you are, the more resonant you are with who you actually are, which is this new updated version of you, the more you will perform and get the outcomes that you're looking for. Okay, so look, I work with people that want to change the world. And sometimes that means I want to build a better family, right? A healthier family, leave behind old patterns. Sometimes it means I want to build a better business. Sometimes it means I have a mission that I'm on. Sometimes it means I want to build a meaningful community around me. Okay. The impact that you are here to make, that I believe you were destined to make, you had a little acorn, the acorn got planted, the oak tree sprouted. You are always going to be an oak tree. There are these incredible things that you're going into, that you're building into, right? The impact that you're here to make cannot be built on an old blueprint that was drawn by a smaller, scared version of you. If you're healing and growing, if you've moved forward, you've done therapy, you've done coaching, you still feel stuck, it's because you're trying to then take that more healed, more grown version of you and operate based on the old blueprint. We're going to change that, right? Here's a question I want to leave you with. What are you forcing yourself to fit into an expectation? Where is that happening for you? Who set that expectation for you? If you didn't choose it, who did? Parents, society, church, school, your friend, your partner, right? What is the expectation? Where are you finding it? And who set it for you, right? What are you treating as a fact that's just a belief that you're allowed to change? What ideas in your head are you taking more seriously than the actual present life around you? Because it's right here, ladies and gentlemen, it's right here to engage with. You have a beautiful life. Yes, there may be challenges. Yes, there may be struggles, but those things are here to help us learn and grow. And if instead of fixating on the old way that you were supposed to do it, you could be open to this challenging situation, trying to point you to a new you that's emerging, a new version of you that you can become, maybe that's a gift and it's not a curse. The most challenging circumstances in my life have pointed me to a stronger, better version of myself every single time. No exception, including the most difficult and traumatizing experiences that I've had. As many of you know, I'm a business owner. I own multiple businesses. I was raised in a culture where success and saving was really important, right? So what's the deal? You get a good degree, you go get a good job, you save a bunch of that money, you put it in your IRA, 401k, whatever, you save up for someday. And one of the expectations I've been really struggling with recently is I'm at a crossroads with my business where I've been, kind of maintaining in a particular direction for about 2.5 years, and I'm trying to make a really big change. And what that really big change is going to require is going to require me to make an investment, right? And that could be getting a loan. That could be taking some money out of the savings, right? And when I was raised with a very deep expectation that I'm never allowed to do that, right? I can put money in savings, but I never take it out. And so recently I made a decision to take a little money out, and it was really, really challenging for me. But it's going to the growth of this new business, part of my business, right? And I'm aware that I'm probably going to have to do it again, actually, in a month or two. Take a little more out because I need to add in order to grow. But in order to do that, I have to violate this expectation. And so what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to challenge this expectation, right? The expectation is if I save the money, I can't use it, right? And the new belief that I'm trying to adopt is if this helps me grow, then it's worth it. Right? I don't want this belief to come from a scarcity place. I don't want this belief to come from a place that's like, I can't use these things that I have. If any of you are video gamers, like traditionally, if I'm playing an RPG, role-playing game, right, I'll get all these items and I'll never use them. I'll take all the money and all the potions and all those things, and I'll get to the final boss and I'll have everything. I never used a lick of it, right? And so I'm just like, oh, maybe that's not healthy. Maybe that's an expectation that I need to challenge, right? Maybe it's a fear-based expectation. And I see this all the time for business owners in different ways. They're playing defense instead of offense. And they're like, why am I not growing? Well, because you have some kind of defensive expectation that's keeping you safe. Again, these old patterns, right? I need to save money. I can't hire anybody. I can't adopt a new process. I shouldn't try a new market. I shouldn't advertise. What if it doesn't work? What if right? And I just want to use some like very practical examples, especially for the other business owners out there. But also maybe if you're somebody who's like, oh, I should save 20%, but I really want to take this vacation with my family. Well, guess what? Someday you're going to be old and your bones are going to crack and you're not going to be able to take that vacation, but you can take it now. And what if that couple $1,000s or whatever is worth taking that vacation now so you can have that joy and experience with your family rather than waiting, well, yeah, but someday that 2,000 could be 20,000. Yeah, sure. So, maybe that's worth challenging. Maybe that experience today is worth more than 20,000 someday. And I know those sound like big numbers. I'm just throwing around numbers. That numbers don't matter. But the idea is that, yeah, compounding interest is real, right? But that compounding interest, when it comes to like your life and your growth and your capacity, is worth much, much, much more than money. And this is just an example, but I'm hoping it's one that touches, right? There are lots of examples of expectations that are holding us back. If you want to get deep, we want to look at what's underneath that expectation that I have in terms of how I'm supposed to use my money. And deep down there's a fear that's like, if I take this money out, it won't be there when I need it. Wow. Like when that fear goes really core and really deep, and I can feel it right here in my chest. And that's where the deeper work comes in. That's where the individual work, like let's use somatics, let's use EMDR, let's use some type of, technique to like really work through that fear and pain in my body. Because it's the right now. I'm ready to grow. And if I don't bet on myself, who will? So this is just an example. I know not everybody listening is a business owner, but I hope you can relate based on this idea of like, hey, here is this expectation, very practical one. Save money in your 401k, right? Where does it come from? This deep rooted fear that I won't have it when I need it. How does it represent itself in my life, in my video games, in not building my business? And, I'm here because I am ready to grow. I am growing. So I am making those decisions. I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to prove to myself that investing in myself, creates benefit for myself, but also for the world around me. And then I'm going to be able to bust that belief, and I'm not going to walk around the world continuing to feel like I need to play small in that way. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm really excited to help you challenge those expectations that are holding you back and keeping you stuck like that one was doing for me. So that's expectation. I want you to find those expectations. I want you to challenge them, and I want you to grow. And if you want to do that again, you can join us at the campfire. It's going to be every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Come, let us know where you're stuck. We'll help you find the expectation. We'll help you work through it for free. I just want to be with other leaders and high performers that are doing this awesome work. So if this episode resonated with you, that's exactly why we built this. The work that you're doing matters, and it's not meant to be done alone. So make sure that you're subscribed to the Evolving on Purpose podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening. And please, please, please share this with a leader in your life. Okay. Yes, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. But share this if it affected you so that we can bring more people on this journey together, so we can be in a deeper life together. You can follow along on Instagram between episodes for more tools, more tips, reflections, and real conversations. And please let us know what you want to explore next to help you on your journey. Or if you want to be on the podcast, feel free to click the link in the description. We'd love to have you. Bring yourself, your honest self. But look, this is bigger than a podcast. This is a movement. It's a community of authentic leaders who are choosing to grow, to heal, and to step into who they were meant to be so that we can make the impact that the world actually needs. So thank you for being here. And as always, let's keep evolving on purpose together.